Hey everybody, Aaron Bishop here on behalf of the Patterns of Life Bible. The book of Acts is full of all sorts of stories of miraculous acts of God and how he works on behalf of his people. And one of those stories that we find in the book of Acts in chapter 12 is the story of Peter being imprisoned by Herod the king, but then his escape from that prison. This story actually contains multiple levels of juxtaposition of several underlying themes and ideas that are occurring throughout the entirety of the book of Acts. And it gives us insight into some of those themes that the book of Acts is exploring throughout its entirety. Let's take a look at the chapter and I'll show you what I mean. In the Patterns of Life Bible, this is P25 in the book of Acts. It's Peter delivered from prison by God's hand. And so as we begin the story in Pericope A, we read of the death of James, the brother of John, that Herod had killed as he began persecuting the church. In A prime, however, we read of Herod's own death at the hands of God. Right away, we get the story of a king that would set himself against God and who paid the ultimate price. But why? Well, let's find out, because as we move further into the story, we'll find out exactly why Herod was killed. In B, then, we see that Herod is attempting to please the people. He's attempting to please the Jews. His actions against James was in an attempt to please the Jews, and so he goes one further and captures Peter, who is the unofficial head of the church at that time. In B prime, then, we read of Herod pleasing the people once again, but this time it's not through some sort of action of capturing somebody or providing anything to the people. Rather, it's because Herod is wearing some sort of fancy garment, and he gives a great speech to the people, a very compelling speech to the people. And the people, when they see the garment and they hear the speech, they praise Herod, and they call out, "He is not a man, he is a god." That right there is reason enough for God to kill Herod. He is like that character of Lucifer in the book of Ezekiel, who attempted to ascend into the heavens and make himself God. And C, then, we see various people making a petition known to the one that they're under. In C, we see this unfortunate translation in verse 4 of Easter. The word there is not Easter. The Greek word there is Pascha. It's Passover. It's not Easter. Easter didn't start for another 300 years or so, and it didn't get the name of Easter for at least another 600 years. So the word there is not Easter. It's Passover. And so it's at the time of Passover. As it says in the previous verse, these were the days of unleavened bread. So while Peter is in prison, the people of the early church bring a petition. They begin to pray to God on his behalf. Well, in C prime, we see a very similar thing occurring. This time, Herod is displeased with the people of Tyre and Sidon, and so they come to him, recognizing that they owe their continued sustenance to Herod. They seek and petition Herod, asking for his favor. So we've got the church petitioning God, asking for his favor, and the nations of the world petitioning Herod for his favor. In D, then, we read of the guards, these unfortunate men who happened to be given the task of guarding Peter in prison. Being a prison guard in the ancient Near East, especially in Roman provinces, was a very serious task. If your prisoner escaped, you paid for it with your life, and that's what we see here. In D, he has two guards put on either side. In fact, he is chained to those guards, presumably by his hands. In D prime, then, after Peter has escaped, those two guards are put to death because of the escape. That is the natural outcome of a prisoner escaping in Rome in the first century. In E, then, we read of hands, and not just any hands, it's Peter's hands in both cases. In E, he is locked up, he's in chains, his hands can't move. And the angel comes to him in the middle of the night, smacks him on the side, says, "Get up," and the chains fall from his hands. In E prime, then, we get this expression from Peter's hands as he goes into the house of the church to reveal himself there and to come into fellowship once again with the church and to praise God for his release. The people are in an uproar and they're celebrating, and he motions with his hands. Now not chained, now free. He motions with his hands for them to settle down and for them to be quiet, because he doesn't want the guard descending upon them and finding him, and everybody in that house would then be taken into prison if they were discovered. In F and F prime, then, we get another interesting juxtaposition. In F, we have the angel that led Peter out of prison and brought him into the streets of the city. And Peter thinks he sees a vision. He doesn't recognize that what's occurring with him right now is a very real event, that he is literally being led by an angel through the city. And in F prime then, when Peter gets to the house and he knocks on the door and the girl hears the story, she runs inside without letting him in and relates her story to the people inside. And the people don't believe. They think she has seen a vision of Peter's ghost, possibly presuming that Peter had already been killed, and so she was seeing his spirit or his ghost wandering around, not recognizing that they too are in the midst of a miracle that is occurring, and that Peter is literally standing at their front door. In G and G prime, then, we get these two gates. In G, it is the gate of the city. As Peter is being led out, the gates of the city open wide for him, and he walks through, and then and only then does the angel disappear from him. It's only at this point that Peter recognizes that what he has experienced is not a vision, but is a reality. And in G prime, then, Peter comes to the house of the mother of John Mark and knocks on her gate, the gate of safety. So we see this escape and safety. He's moving out of the dangerous place and into the safe place with these two gates that he has to pass through in his journey. And in the center, Peter comes to his senses and recognizes that God has in fact delivered him from the hands of Herod. And not just from the hands of Herod, but from the hands of the Jews, and the hope that the Jews had that Herod would kill him. And that's where we find the juxtaposition or the contrast that occurs in this pattern. In the ascent of the pattern, as it opens up, we find several different things going on. The first thing we see going on is King Herod setting himself up against the people of God and doing what is pleasing to the people or to the nations or to other humans. But then we have the church that's set against him, and they're doing the things that are pleasing to God. So we have this contrast between them of pleasing men and pleasing God, a theme that runs all throughout the book of Acts. Another thing that we have going on in this chapter is the first part of the chiasm, the ascent, tells the story of Peter's imprisonment. But the second part, the descent out of the chiasm, tells of Peter's freedom and his escape and his release. And so we get this juxtaposition between the kingdoms of the world and the ways of the world seeking to imprison and keep people in bondage, but the ways of God and the Spirit of God leading people into freedom. Again, another theme that is present throughout the book of Acts in many different ways, whether it's a spiritual reality or a physical reality. We see these themes represented throughout the book of Acts. And this story gives us just that wonderful, great insight into these ideas as they play against each other in this grander narrative of the book of Acts. And they're all condensed down into this one story of a single man who is put in prison and set free.